That was Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale announcing the tabling of Bill C-93 to enable pardons for Canadians with convictions for simple possession of marijuana. Now, to discuss today's announcement, I'm joined from Toronto by Annamaria Enenajor. She is a lawyer, an author, and a campaign director for the Campaign for Cannabis Amnesty. Ms. Enenajor, thank you very much for taking the time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, first of all, can I get your reaction to today's legislation?
Well, today's legislation wasn't very surprising. On October the 17th, Minister Goodale announced that the government was considering tabling legislation to provide expedited and free pardons for individuals with previous cannabis conviction offenses. The only debate was whether the pardon or whether the mechanism that they would use would result in a complete expungement of those records or simply a pardon or a record suspension. And so today we've confirmed that what the government is proposing is a record suspension system, but they are expediting the process and they are making it free for individuals that only have simple cannabis possession offenses on their criminal records.
Okay, what were you in favor of? Because there were people arguing for a full expungement, and share with us the argument of why the two are different and why you feel one is better than the other.
Well, full expungement is what my organization, the Campaign for Cannabis Amnesty, has been advocating for. Full expungement is what all jurisdictions in the United States that have decriminalized and legalized or legalized cannabis have implemented in order to remedy the situation of the consequences that a person has to deal with following a cannabis conviction, especially following the fact that these offenses are no longer prohibited. And the difference between, or the main difference between an expungement and a pardon or record suspension, as they're now called, is that an expungement is a complete and permanent deletion of a person's criminal record, and all, not just the entry on their record, but all records in relation to that entry. So police records from all jurisdictions and from all levels of government. What a pardon is you're not destroying the person's criminal record. Essentially what the government is doing is that they're taking a person's criminal record and putting them separate and apart from other criminal records, so they can't be accessed for the purpose of seeking employment or volunteer opportunities in theory, but the records still remain and they can continue to be accessed by certain government bodies.
Okay, I've heard two things, also further to that argument in favor of expungement. The NDP, for example, has been saying if someone is asked, do you have a criminal record? And you've gotten a record suspension or you've gotten a pardon, some people will still feel compelled to say, yes, I do have a criminal record. Is that a legitimate concern, or can one just say, no, I've had a pardon, I'm going to answer, no, I don't have a criminal record?
Well, that's where something called the deeming provision that is in Bill C-415, which is an alternate bill that was proposed by Murray Rankin in October, comes in. And what a deeming provision does is it not only forgives the person for the offense, but it also allows them to answer that question truthfully. So it allows them, what it does is it's as if that offense never existed to begin with.
Okay, but if people do get a pardon under this new system, you would recommend that they are able to say, yes, I do not have a criminal record.
Well, they can answer that they don't have a criminal record, but they can't answer the questions. The relevant question is whether
have you ever been found guilty of?
Convicted of an offense, and they would have to say, yes, I've been convicted of an offense, but I received a pardon.
Okay, well, I don't want to make this too complicated for our viewers, but another thing which has come up, and that is people have argued that in crossing the border, because this is a big one, in crossing the border, some people have argued it's better to have a criminal record suspension, a pardon, because then you carry a piece of paper. And then many jurisdictions won't have removed your record. So in the United States, it's quite possible that you could get an expungement and they will still have on databanks in the States a criminal record. And if you say, no, I don't have a criminal record, and they find in their files that have not been updated a criminal record, you're in worse trouble than if you just carried a pardon, a piece of paper and a pardon. You can actually show it to people. That could get beyond in other words, outdated databanks where they haven't updated their databanks.
Right. So that is a concern where a foreign government already has access to our databanks.
Yeah. Well, we do have sharing, don't we? We have sharing of criminal records, with the United States.
not certain whether that takes place automatically once a criminal record is created, or whether it's only when when an individual makes the attempt to cross the border that that information is then drawn into the United States system. So we don't know where or at what point that the United States gets access to that information, whether it's a sort of a routine update or whether it's only done when a person crosses the border. If it's only done when a person crosses the border and that's what triggers the information being provided to the United States, then if a person crosses the border who's had an expungement, then that issue will never arise because it will be as if they've never committed that offense before. Right. If the person attempts to cross the border and he or she does have a criminal record with respect to cannabis simple possession and they've received a pardon, that still doesn't get them across the border. So it doesn't matter whether they have their papers with them or not. It's not helpful to get across the border because the United States does not recognize Canadian pardons.
Okay, so given that the government appears to be, I mean, we're assuming that this bill might pass if it gets passed before the election. We'll be going ahead with a pardon system. What are any outstanding concerns? Is it delays? They've removed the waiting period, but some people have seen in California, for example, that the first few years of the regime, it took a long time for people to get pardons.
That's one of the concerns, and also another concern is the accessibility of the regime for people who are interested in getting their records suspended or getting a pardon. So one of the things that the government has noticed when it, for example, in recent years or very recently with the passage of Bill C-66, which allowed for the expungement of criminal records for people with previous offenses on their records that related to homophobic offenses. Mm-hmm. What happened in that case is that even though that process was made simple and accessible, it wasn't accessible to individuals, and you didn't get a lot of uptake. Yeah. So one of the concerns that we have is how easy is this process going to be for people who would like to buy into it, and what the government is doing to make sure that accessibility is prioritized.
Is that something to monitor? Because I think I've seen references to in California there was so little uptake, especially among the groups that are considered the racialized and indigenous, was that they made it more accessible by making it through the driver's license. You would go to a place where you get your driver's license.
Exactly. So it's all of those minor aspects of the implementation of this. So how is a person going to be able to fill the application? Is it only going to be available online? What if someone lives in remote communities? How this is going to be implemented is a huge concern for us, and that's something that we will be monitoring.
Okay, well, we will be monitoring this with you. I thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.